couple months ago, I was in a coffee shop, and I met this gentleman spontaneously. He actually approached me, and I didn't approach him, which is unusual because I'm usually the one initiating the conversation. He reached over and had overheard a conversation and asked a couple questions. We got into some information about why he was in Kansas City and who he was and what he was doing. I shared a little bit about myself with him. Found out that he'd moved here from California. I was like, why did you move here from California? And the first thing he shared with me was he needed to get away from the community, the environment, the place he was living, because there was a strong necessity to be a part of a gang. Now, I don't know anything about gangs, but I could tell from his voice that he did not want to be a part of that. He wanted to escape from that lifestyle and that world, and he knew that if he didn't move away from there, that he'd be stuck in that environment and that culture of being a part of a gang. Again, I don't know anything about gangs, really. I've never had that pressure. I've never been in that experience, that environment. But I could tell that it was critical that he escaped from that environment. I'm talking about emotions of leading people, and this is the series that I'm focused on. And last week I talked about belonging and the glorious value and beauty of belonging to something or belonging to a group of people. But I also wanted to look at belonging from a different perspective. I want to look at belonging from the dark side of it. Because belonging isn't necessarily always a healthy thing, and leaders sometimes use, skills, use techniques, ways to help people belong, but it may not be the most beneficial. I want to explore this topic of the dark side of belonging today. Now, this is a tough conversation, maybe a tough episode, so I'm going to try to be as honest as I can with it and share with you my thoughts that are connected to this particular topic. So let's make this happen. I define belonging as the emotional and psychological experience of being accepted and valued and safe within a group of people. And the statement was belonging is one of the strongest predictors of human flourishing. I would probably have to preface that belonging to healthy groups of people is one of the strongest predictors of human flourishing, because we can also belong to unhealthy groups of people. I was talking to a lady recently who worked for an organization that she really loved. And if I mentioned this organization, everybody would know the organization. She works in the supply chain and the corporate offices, and she clearly communicated to me the statement, I drank the Kool-Aid. I love my company. And she used that in a very positive way. We use that term, drank the Kool-Aid, in a positive way oftentimes. It says, I value the group and that I'm a part of. I respect what they're doing. I think they're doing the right thing and the right track, and they're behaving the right way. But if we look at the history of I drank the Kool-Aid, it's not really a very good story. If children are listening right now, I'd probably pause and listen to this later. But I drank the Kool-Aid came from a horrible event that happened in 1978. This man named Jim Jones had a following of people in Central America, and he compelled this group of 900 people, including over 300 children, to commit revolutionary suicide, is the quote, by drinking a fruit punch laced with cyanide and sedatives. 900 people died because of a nefarious leader, a horrible person that convinced people to belong to an organization that was not in the best interest of them. They drank the Kool-Aid. I say that because there are nefarious groups and nefarious people in this world. The definition of nefarious simply means corrupt, unethical, immoral, criminal, or even evil. We have to be aware of nefarious groups, nefarious leaders. We also have to be aware of these compulsions in ourselves. Now let's start with what compels someone to join a group that may have nefarious motives. The answer is belonging. That's the number one answer. People want to feel like they belong to something to eliminate the feelings of a loneliness or anxiety or shame or isolation. People also want a sense of significance or meaning. They'll associate themselves with a group that might have nefarious purposes or motives. Safety is another reason why people may join groups. They want to feel protected. They actually might need to feel protected or a part of a group that protects them. There's social connections that can cause people to join groups that may not be healthy for them. This is an interesting one. People connect with groups because they have a shared grievance. They despise some other group, or they despise something that's happening. So they may join groups that have unethical or moral values. Charismatic leaders can also have this draw and pull on people to bring them into groups that may not have the best interest in mind for the individual. Look at that list that I just shared: significance, meaning, safety, social connections, a charismatic leader, sense of belonging. A lot of those reasons are the same reasons why people belong to healthy organizations or healthy groups of people. But really, I would suggest that once somebody is a part of a group that has these kinds of motives or these kinds of intentions, it's a false belonging. It looks like it might smell like it a little bit, but to me it's really a shadow of belonging. It doesn't truly go back to our definition, where I would say someone is emotionally accepted, valued, and safe. If I don't have all three of those, accepted, valued, and also safe over the long term, that is not a healthy group to be a part of. We looked at why someone might be compelled to join a group that has nefarious motives, but now let's look at what are some indicators of a nefarious leader. And I want to be mindful of this. I'm going to go to some extremes here when I talk about these are some characteristics of a nefarious leader. And I want to list off a few thoughts for you. And I want you to look at this from a whole perspective. You can't just take one piece of this out. We have to look at it from a whole perspective. And I also want to challenge us to look at ourselves, look at our own hearts and our own minds, where we might be compelled to fall into these nefarious leadership traits or characteristics. Let me give you a few of these. First of all, us versus them mentality. There's a hated enemy. A nefarious leader oftentimes perpetuates this notion of there's an enemy. There's somebody evil over there, and it is our responsibility and our job to bind together to stop that evil enemy. And it's pretty simple. We can find this mentality of the evil enemy pretty quickly in our world. We can look at sports, we can look at business, politics, nonprofits, religious organizations are all entities that could have this message of a hated enemy. It's us versus them. Think about sports. The foundation of sports is there's an enemy. We have to go defeat that enemy. Recently here in my local community, high school coaches were fired because they broke the rules. They falsified players' addresses so they could play within their district, on their team. I've seen in businesses where one department sees another department as the enemy, us versus them. Distribution versus customer service. Sales versus production. We can easily fall into this category and this mentality of us versus them. I won't even go into politics, religion, or nonprofits, but we can see those same behaviors of us versus them or a hated enemy. So there's the first thing that we have to be aware of as a leader that might have nefarious motives or attributes. Second, excessive leadership authority. If a leader presents themselves as one who has all the answers, cannot be questioned, discourages any criticism towards themselves or will not accept any criticism, and they claim they have special authority or insight, that's a sign of a nefarious leader. Number 3, a nefarious leader will control information. They'll suppress independent thinking or ideas. Number 4, nefarious leaders use manipulation through guilt, fear, or shame. Now, I kind of hate to say this, but as parents, how oftentimes do we fall into that category of using fear, guilt, or shame to manipulate our children to doing something? I was at a McDonald's and a parent was trying to get their 2 or 3-year-old child to get their shoes on and head for the door and leave. And the parent said this: if you don't put your shoes on, we're going to leave you here. I mean, how horrible is that for a 3-year-old message to be guilted or shamed into getting their shoes on, and the thought of you can't come home with us if you don't do this. Next, a moral exemption. A nefarious leader will see themselves above the law, above ethical codes, and it can happen simple in our world too. We fudge a little bit here and there. Don't worry about your expense report. You can go out to that fancy meal, just use cash and we'll write it off as a tip. Finally, here's another indicator of a nefarious leader or organization or group, is if somebody leaves, that individual that leaves is punished in some way or viewed as, again, the enemy. Those are some indicators of nefarious behaviors of a leader. And again, we have to look at these as a whole, and also as individuals, we have to kind of check ourselves. Where might we fall in this category of trying to get people to belong, but using nefarious tactics? So what do we do with this? Well, here's the try it out section. I'm going to offer up 2 reflection exercises to help us consider this notion of the dark side of belonging. The first reflection exercise for you as an individual is this. Check yourself. Do you use some of these nefarious tactics to cause people or to compel people to belong to the groups that you're leading? I think that's a really great question to ask ourselves. Are we using some of these techniques intentionally or unintentionally to compel people to be a part of a group? Next individual exercise for you is to simply evaluate the groups that you're a part of or the organizations that you support. Are the leaders in those organizations or the groups you're a part of using nefarious tactics to compel people to belong to that organization or that entity or that team? There's the try it out section. Simply reflect on yourself, and if you're using any of these nefarious tactics to influence people, or if you're a part of a group that leaders are using these tactics to cause people to belong or support those groups, and then consider, is that a group you really want to be a part of? Here is the quote of the week. Knowing and living virtuously is to know where you belong and to know where you don't belong. Thank you so much for listening to the Toddcast, your weekly leadership nudge. I know this was a tougher conversation to have today. Hopefully you stuck around and you got some value out of it. I'm sure there's more thinking you can do in regards to the dark side of belonging. And I also hope you found some value in this to help yourself become a more confident and discerning leader. I pray that you will move far away from the desire to be nefarious. I also pray that you will recognize those nefarious leaders in your life and move far away from them. Hey, have a great week. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.